Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Welcome to our virtual webinar on developing a successful SAT program. Just quickly, some housekeeping before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be used by the Goldfish team. We usually put this on YouTube, so feel free to, once this is up, to share it with your friends, family, or anyone who would find this useful. Feel free to post some questions in the message section for Dan and Sharif to go over if we have time at the end of the webinar. We only assign an hour, so we might go a bit over, but if we have time, we'll go over your questions at the end. And then, we've got two really insightful speakers today, really experts in the fields, but I'm going to hand over to Sharif and Dan to just quickly introduce themselves before we get started.
Cool. Happy to go first. Thanks, S. So Sharif Gardner. I work for the SANS Institute. So the SANS Institute is the world's largest and most trusted provider of cybersecurity skills training. And I head up all the business that we do with defence, military and law enforcement agencies across the UK, Ireland and Nordics regions. My background is former military. That's where I've known Dan for many, many years. Started my career out in the British Royal Marines, and I've worked in various security roles and cybersecurity for the sort of last 10 years.
Hey everyone, thanks very much for joining us. I'm Dan Thornton, CEO and co-founder at Goldfish. My background, like Sharif said, British military, Royal Marine Commandos for a number of years, and then about 14 years in security and crisis management around the world for a number of large sort of global organizations before setting up Goldfish and focusing primarily on security awareness training and sort of building secure cultures in organizations across a range of different industries.
Thanks, Sharif. Thanks, Dan. I think let's get started. Firstly, I think the most important aspect of building a successful SAT program is really building from the ground up, and that's building a company culture. So I think the first question really is, how can organizations cultivate a culture that prioritizes systematic and proactive security and compliance training?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. First things first. Organizations need to understand or really look at how they want to approach this. If security awareness training, if training employees, if secure culture, is really just about ticking boxes for compliance purposes or insurance purposes, then it's a different conversation that we're having. But, to really make a security awareness training program effective, it needs to be taken the approach of building culture and creating culture and actually trying to change behavior, because that's what's going to reduce an organization's risk to cyber attack, to fraud, to large scams that could really put them out of business. So, this is the right way to go about it. It's a fundamental security control to employee training and to raise awareness and to build culture. So it's one of the first things really that an organization needs to understand, is that it's not just a tick box exercise. It's really a fundamental security control that a lot has to be done around that. And they have to take a really thorough approach on how they build their programs, how they launch those programs. So, just one really to kick off with.
I think also, just to sort of tail on to what Dan's saying there as well, is I think we also have to remember that in every single individual that works within these organizations, whether you're a micro enterprise or a global S&P 100 type company, every single person lives online, works online, shops online, plays online. They spend their entire life, glued to a phone. And if they're a bit old school, guaranteed that their kids are doing it or their grandkids are doing it. So once you start to tackle the need that individuals have, this need to be online and be in this space, then you have to understand, well, what is the adversarial and threat landscape look like for each individual? If you can make things personal to people, they will then take those behaviors internally within their organizations. And yes, ultimately, with all security training, whether it's not just security training, whether it's health and safety training, whether it's security training, whether it's cybersecurity training, and awareness, ultimately, there's a lot of organizations that will start out, understanding that, yes, there is a compliance need as to why they do this, but compliance doesn't necessarily equal security. So you have to try and really tackle the individual, really get them to understand what it is and why it matters to them. There will be multiple organizations where the people love their organization. They want to do everything they possibly can to protect it because they just love the culture that they're in. But there will be a handful of people that don't care about the organization they work in. They just turn up to do a job and go home. So it's trying to make sure that you have to play and understand that you're dealing with different characters, you're dealing with different personalities, you're dealing with different motivations within organizations. Some people have a certain characteristic that they bring to the organization, and it's just making sure that you try and tackle each characteristic on its own merit. And that's why these programs need to be engaging, and they're not always straightforward to get right. And you get the tick box, compliance training, I'll do my hour a year and away I'm done. But ultimately, when you start to look at some of how you promote that awareness and how you really try and drive behavior change, you look at brands like yourselves, and other organizations out there as well. It's a cool brand. You're getting people to believe and you're marketing it in the right way. And by, it's not just a security problem. It's a marketing problem. It's a HR problem. And you're trying to get people to buy into what it is that you're doing, and ultimately you've got to get on the front foot. Not all of this is just tick box training, compliance training, do your annual phishing simulations, and away you go. It's what are the on-site sessions that organizations are looking to do? How what other areas are they getting their sources from? So it's just making sure that there's some really good program indicators in there, people indicators, and time in which to achieve your programs are really important as well to start thinking about as you start to prioritize these.
And the one thing that you mentioned there, Sharif, about different departments is quite key as well. When you're starting, when you're sort of looking at how you're going to grow your program, how you're going to launch your program, how you're going to sort of go around building culture. A lot of organizations struggle to decide sort of where they're going to sit this in the department, who's going to be responsible, who's going to take the reins. And the cybersecurity teams, your security teams may think that it needs to be pushed from them. The IT department may need, it needs to be pushed from them. Then you've got your training teams. If you're in larger organizations and you've got training departments, they'll say that it needs to come from them. But this is a tough one because it's about changing behavior, because it's about culture. It's a new subject and we need people to adopt it. It's not just training. It's a human problem. It's this problem of actually getting people to adopt it, getting to people to listen, getting people to accept it. And that's a bigger skill than what a lot of training departments will have, what a lot of IT departments, what a lot of security teams will have experience with. And so it becomes a combined effort. And we'll get onto that on how to do that effectively. But essentially, you're addressing a human problem of cybersecurity is raising awareness, building security awareness, building secure culture. This is, addressing that human element, but the actual building of a program is its own human problem because a lot of people don't want to do it. A lot of people don't care. It's not their priority. It's not their problem. So you have to overcome that first, which is a huge obstacle. And I'd say sort of two main levels or two main approaches to that. You can look at it on an organizational level, how you're going to build that culture, and then you look at it at an individual level as well. So on the organizational level within a company, look at what the company culture currently is. Look at what, how they go about their training, how they go about their communications with the organization, and try and fit security awareness into that. Try and get visible support from your leaders in the organization, your board, your executives, if they can buy in to your program and to what you're trying to do, and they start promoting it, start bringing it up at all hands meetings, start bringing it up at different meetings and different communications, that's going to be a big deal as well. And just make sure, like we mentioned, you need to collaborate across departments. All right. If you're the security guy, or you're the IT guy, or you're the training guy, and you try and do this in isolation and push this out into your organization, it's likely going to fail. You need to get HR on board. You need to get your communications team on board, your marketing team on board. All of these different specializations in an organization will all have great ideas on how you're going to be able to promote security awareness and secure culture in your organization. And it's great to get them all around the table together. On an individual level, once you looked at it at an organization, how you're going to put this into your company, you need to focus on the end learner, the end user, that employee who is working 10-hour days, running back and forth, doesn't have a spare minute to grab a cup of coffee, and now we're going to try and load way more on them than they already have. They don't care. Like Sharif says, they come in, they clock out. Security is not part of their job description. They don't care. It's not their company. So how do we get across to them? How do we make this important and try and change their behavior? We need to acknowledge that employees face security risks both at work and at home. So if we can show them value of the training and value of the program to themselves, and show a sort of personal element on it, that we're going to give you skills, we're going to raise awareness, we're going to help you change security behavior, that's not only going to help you here in the office, but it's going to help you at home, protect your own devices, your family's devices, all of your online behavior and stuff there. So it's really important to make it personal for them, and to really empower them to be a lot safer online and protect them and their families' devices, sensitive information as well.
And just to continue as well from that, I think it's understanding the why. Why is it you're going to start a program? Is it because you're a small enterprise startup and you just think, right, we need to embed this in at the very, very start? Or is it that you've just got there's a compliance reason? Typically speaking, most organizations will start this because there is a standard, a regulation, or a compliance reason as to why they're doing it, whether they're in a highly regulated financial services sector or they're a vendor to that specific space, for example, and it's just an absolute requirement to get started with this. Whether their cyber insurance policy is mandating that they have to do it, which is starting to see a common thread as well. But it's just making sure that you understand the reasons as to why you're starting. You understand the reasons as to why you're starting. The communication of that becomes far more straightforward for to the organization. Like I say, you've got to have those program indicators, you've got to have those people indicators, and if you can explain to your people the why we're doing this and why this matters to us as an organization, large or small, you'll then start to, and with an element of positivity. That is the absolute key, because if people think that they're just doing this as another punishment metric because of someone's yielding a big sword for a big stick further up the line, the buy-in is very, very difficult. I think the other thing is important to understand when you start to look at how to prioritize these things as well, is understand that this is not an overnight success. It takes typically 3 to 10 years to shape an organization's culture. And if you think security typically has always been seen as this bolt-on. So you've just got to understand that it takes a while for that to happen. And the more complex that your organization is, obviously that's going to take time. And I think just want to finish up with, if the typical cybersecurity transformational leader has 3 main remits in which they have to consider and think about. Technology. What technologies are they going to be using to make their organization more secure? What's the strategy? What is it that we are strategically, what are we aligned to? Are we in the banking sector? Are we in the energy sector? Are we in the retail sector? All have very, very different risk identifiers in many aspects. And the final one, which is what we're tackling here, is the cultural aspect. They have to understand security culture, because you can forget the other two if you haven't got your culture right. Culture eats strategy for breakfast. So the job has become vast in terms of how you transform an organization. But that is typically the three key areas that a transformational leader needs to look at when they're looking at cybersecurity. And like I say, it doesn't matter whether you're a small micro enterprise or a large or a large enterprise, because there are specific cyber security risks that no company is immune from. And I'll give you just one to get into a tactical: a business email compromise. Every single organization on the planet, large or small, is receiving emails that would appear to be from a specific person within the organization, pretending to be a vendor, or falsifying to be a vendor for invoice manipulation, for example. Most organizations, nearly every organization, feels that type of risk. So, then you can then really start to channel in on what specific training is needed for those specific threat scenarios.
Absolutely, and I think a big factor there as well is the characteristic in building your company culture. But I think to make this effective is really you have to get buy-in from top level. And the next question really is, how do you secure top level support for security awareness training programs despite potential resistance from executives?
Anytime that you are trying to get budget in an organization, you're going to come up against brick walls. No one has budget. And especially when it comes to security, because a lot of the time, the majority of the time, your security awareness training budget is likely going to fall under your security budget. And that's going to be spent very, very quickly on all the smart technical controls out there that your security team wants to spend on. And there's very little left for training and deploying of training and programs and, culture level stuff. So it is tough, and it's needed to get right. And like we said, your first step is securing the support from that top level. That's where your budget's going to come from. That's where the success of your program is going to run from, if you can get their buy-in and you can get them to support it and you can get them to promote it. So it comes down to selling. As much as you're going to be selling security culture to your organization and to the employees, you need to start your sales pitch at that level. They need to understand why this is important for the organization, whether you're pitching to, the C-suite, whether you're pitching to the IT manager or the CFO, whoever it is, you're going to be pitching. You need to be selling that. If this is what you want to roll out in the organization, whether you're a vendor, if you're a managed security service provider and you need to pitch this to that top level, or you are, the training manager or the cybersecurity manager, you need to be pitching this upwards in order to secure budget and to get their buy-in and support. So speak their language. No one on the C-suite wants to hear technical jargon. If you can put it into their language and talk about risk management to the organization, you can talk about return on investment, you can talk about impact on the bottom line. All of this type of language is what they will understand and what they'll be able to consider, discuss amongst themselves. All right. Particularly in the sales front, particularly to that level as well. If you are talking about loss aversion, it's a lot more powerful than sort of benefits. Instead of talking benefits of security awareness training, talk about what they can avoid losing as a company and potential losses that this can help avoid. So that's really important.
And I think, that's absolutely critical. It's how much money is this going to cost me if and when it goes wrong? And organizations are aware. Never have cyber risks been more publicized than they are now today. We've had the ransomware problem, which has been in the news for the last 5 years and is still in the news. That is a really good, and again, you don't want to scare people into this problem, because quite frankly, people will do one of two things. They'll either ignore it and bury their head in the sand, or they'll throw a load of money at the wrong problem. They'll buy the next shiny security control that doesn't necessarily solve their problem. So it's trying to scare people into buying this type of stuff doesn't really work. Or in my experience, is less effective than actually showing them, well, actually, if you put in a several stage process here of, well, let's start because there's an element of compliance reason as to why we need to do this. Our insurers want it, or so on and so on and so forth. Then from that, we will move on to a stage of promoting awareness and behavior change, and just making sure that every employee really buys into what it is that we're trying to do. From that, you can then start to look at a long-term, sustained program of culture change there. And then the final one ultimately becomes metrics. You have to be able to identify to a board, okay, year one, these are the metrics that you're going to get. We're going to give you how many people have completed our training. Year two, I'm going to not only tell you how many phishing simulation clicks that these guys have done, as an example, for example, but more importantly, the report rates, because report rates then give us a sense of culture change. Then year 4 or 5 into the program, we're then going to start surveying attitudes towards security. And then from that, we will then start to understand where our incidents are going, because we'll have a far better understanding of our estate. And ultimately, a lot of that is not just security awareness training. It's how all of those controls and security awareness, culture and behavioral change impacts that organization. So if you can start to present that type of roadmap to a board, you're more likely to get that buy-in, and you're more likely to get that buy-in for the longer term, because this isn't, like I say, it's not just an annual tick box exercise, because otherwise if the board think that, you're going to be fighting year on year on year on year for the budget, and eventually that could potentially diminish over time, not increase over time.
Yeah, and unfortunately, to add to that, bean counters in every organization, budget holders in every organization, they're going to be reluctant to give up what, budget for what they see as a pure expense. They don't know what the return is on that. They don't understand what the return is. And even today, despite the amount of press on cyber attacks and cyber incidents and huge impacts on organizations, a lot of senior leaders will still have their head in the sand over this, and believe we're too small for this. We are not a big target. They're not targeting our industry. But I promise you, in your pitch to them, you will be able to find either industry benchmarks of how employee training, security awareness training is taking off in your industry, and other organizations similar to yours, similar to your size, similar industry, are incorporating secure cultures and training employees and rolling out security awareness training. You'll be able to explain that to them, that other companies are starting to take this very seriously. At the same time, you can leverage recent security incidents that have been perhaps in the media, impacting organizations of a similar size in your industry as well. And a lot of that data is coming out on a regular basis. Like Sharif said, we don't want to be scaring anybody. We don't need to be, worrying people to death about it. But there's perfect examples out there of organizations that are getting scammed, losing money, having huge impacts and tough recoveries from cyber attacks on a regular basis from the whole human factor. So it's it's a tough one to sell, but there's a number of different ways.
It is a tough one to sell, but there are a couple of things that I think will start to, there's the carrot and the stick terms of in terms of trying to get your executives, isn't there? The carrot is like I say, put that sort of 5-stage plan in place to present and pitch your idea as to why this is important to the businesses and itself. The other side is the stick side, and I say the stick side, I mean, there's the stick side from a regulatory standpoint. We are now starting to see, for example, the SEC, the Security Exchange Commission in the US, requiring cybersecurity leaders to sit on boards now, as an example. You're also starting to see a lot more security leaders, IT managers who have suffered a major incident. And, there's nothing that focuses the mind than someone who's been through the problem of suffering a major incident and seeing not only the increased work time, business interruption losses, and general costs first, IT response costs, to focus that mind. They become the best salespeople that you've probably got then. So it's trying to, you're starting to see more and more of those types of people now in senior positions within organizations who've trod the hard yards. They've had the tough experiences and they've suffered the attacks.
Dan, do you have anything else you wanted to add to that before moving on?
No, I'm sure you've covered the legal and compliance bits there, and that, if you can get that across in the way where security awareness training is not just flavor of the month security control. It's not just a fad that you want to try out and spend lots of money on, but it's actually something that can align with business goals. And this is, again, comes back to the language that they want to hear. If you can explain, if you can demonstrate, if you can pitch to them on how a security aware culture supports overall business goals like improving customer trust, protecting brand reputation, or meeting compliance requirements, all of this is talking their language. This will get you one step further to securing that budget and then get their buy-in and support for how important this really is.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I did have one final thing, that I didn't get across. I think the other critical thing to get across to business leaders in this space, because they will be battling with my IT guy says that we've got firewalls in place, we've got antivirus, we've got these technology solutions in place that are going to protect us from all of that. So why do I need this on top of that? And like I say, it comes down to those three things. You've got security, you've got technology, strategy, culture. The three are not mutually exclusive. They all need to be thought of at the same time. And if you can get your executives to understand that technology alone is not going to protect them in this space, yes, it will help them prevent and detect, but ultimately, when all of those things go wrong, and they can and they do, it's your IT guy's not going to be there, that's going to be in front of the press or communicating with your customers or so on and so forth. So it's really, really important to understand that you can't just technology your way out of this problem.
100%. And Sharif, that was actually a good intro, because I think the human element is always the weakest link in your overall cybersecurity posture. And it's a fact that we usually put out there, but considering that human error accounts for 95% of successful cybersecurity incidences, how should organizations integrate security awareness training into their overall cybersecurity strategy?
You want me to go first on that one, seeing as I segued in? Yeah, I think ultimately what they've got to look at really is it's that roadmap. It's presenting, well, what is it that I'm going to achieve and by when, and what are the key milestones that I'm going to be able to do. It's understanding that leadership understands and commits to that need for managing human risk. And to be honest, I think we've covered a lot of this question actually in some of the previous aspects. You've got to just garner that support, and if you can garner that support, then you can start to focus on your strategy. Like I said, culture will eat strategy for breakfast every single time when it comes to trying to set those agendas. But you cannot do it. Like I said, you cannot technology your way solely out of this problem. Equally, you can't just make everybody aware and just hope nobody clicks on anything and that's it. Your problem of cyber risk is solved. You've also got to look at what's around the corner. So you've also got to look at, like I said, you've got to look at the different behaviors and characteristics of individuals within your organization, because again, that will help you shape your cybersecurity strategy. Your developers are going to be very, very different people to your salespeople. They just are. That's just the way they are, and for very good reasons. Those guys are focused. They're narrowed in on what it is that they're doing. They work in binary functions in many areas as well. And ultimately, your salespeople are all out there. These are the people that are trying to be friendly to everybody. So they're going to introduce a lot more risk in many different ways in some respects. But both, so it's just making sure that you understand you've got different people within the organizations that are making up all of the constituent parts to your organization. And when one system fails, the other's going to have to pick it up somewhere along the way. So I think for me, I think a lot of this we've covered previously, but it's just making sure that you have those indicators in place and get to a point of metrics. Get to a point of key stage metrics, because that's essentially how you'll really be able to identify whether your cybersecurity strategy is working.
Yeah, so something I'll definitely add there, Sharif, is looking at the question about integrating security awareness training into an overall cybersecurity strategy. And it's a fundamental control. It's a fundamental part of the strategy. It really brings it all in. A lot of organizations will make the assumption that therefore the best team to roll this out, the best team to deploy a security awareness training program is going to be the security team. And, unfortunately, despite all of their knowledge and all of their technical know-how, and despite, them being, the perfect people to deploy all of the technical controls, a lot of the time they don't have the skills, they don't have the communication skills, and they don't have the training skills or people skills to actually do this effectively. So a lot of the time in an organization, the obvious default security team will roll out, secure culture and security awareness training program. It may not be the best choice in an organization. And so that's one of the first steps that you need to do is to be effective. Look at who's the best to do this. Some organizations that we've worked with, it will be their security team, and maybe they'll have a dedicated security awareness person. Other companies, it could be, their dedicated training team. Sometimes HR does it. They're the people department. They work with people on a daily basis. They know how to get across to the humans in their organization. We've seen it with communications teams have run this. And marketing teams have done this internally for their organizations because they are the communications professionals. They know how to get people to change behavior. Essentially, this is marketing for security. We're not teaching people any crazy new skills. We're not upskilling people. We're raising their awareness about security risks and giving them some very, very basic skills and basic behavior on how to stay safe online, keep organizations safe. But it's not rocket science. What is really, really necessary for this to work and for this to get integrated is communications. It's we'll talk about it to death. It's communications. Sharif has already said about how important it is to explain the why. Before anything gets launched, we need to communicate with organizations, to all of the employees. Once we've got that buy-in, now it's communicating into the organization. We are launching a security awareness training program. Why are we doing that? How is that benefiting the organization? How is that benefiting you as an end user, as an employee, as a learner? What are the benefits of this? How long are we going to run it for? What can you expect to come from the program? So communication is everything. And that's not just a once-off. That's a regular, keeping people updated on new threats, keeping people updated on, new activities, different events we may be having around security. It's constantly talking about it and keeping cybersecurity front of mind for people, exactly like people would in a marketing campaign. So it's constantly pushing stuff out, keeping people aware of what's happening, the benefits to the organization. It's promoting it. It's making a big deal about successes. If we're hitting metrics and we're improving, it's a great thing to celebrate. And so communication is everything. And if that means that the security team partners with the communications team or partners with HR, that's great. But you have to identify who's going to be leading this and who's going to be running this.
I think something that just came to me there as well with regards to the remember, if you're doing nothing, you're not only not managing your human risk, but you're also probably somewhere non-compliant with something somewhere. And I'll give you a real micro example. If you are a private landlord, for example, in the UK, and you have one property, you now have to sign up to the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office, and you now have to be compliant within GDPR. Then you start to have a look at all the regulations that come, or all of the requirements come with GDPR. That's just one very micro example. It doesn't matter whether you're a mum and pop shop on a high street or whether you're a conglomerate. Generally, if you're not doing anything in this space, you're not only failing in your human risk. And sorry, this sounds quite negative, but I just want to try and just give a bit of a sense of where we are in today's environment. But you're highly vulnerable from a human aspects of human-driven incidents, phishing, all that sort of stuff. But you're also probably failing to meet any compliance requirements from an insurance or whatever standpoint. As soon as you start to move and go, right, well, at least I've got a why. My why is a compliance standpoint. Okay, right. So that now you're going to satisfy your legal standpoint. But we're still not tackling those human aspects. And then you start to look at, well, how do you start to promote that awareness, like Dan says, via your marketing means, via your HR means, whether you've got a dedicated security awareness manager, because that's the part you're in. Then you start to move forward. By tackling some of that culture straight away, you're now already integrating this into your overall cybersecurity strategy. And I think it's just really important to just understand that start with something will help to just foster that culture, will help to foster an environment that enables you to then kick on, move on, and shape your cybersecurity strategy further.
Yeah, just one thing to add it, Sharif mentioned it. You want to be able to track your metrics. You want to be able to measure how you are improving over time. And that's something that you need to plan for from day one, whether it's training completion or quiz scores that you're doing with your learning and your training, or whether it's your social engineering vulnerability that you're measuring through phishing simulations into your organization. Make it a positive experience for the employees. Make it as fun as possible. Find content that's going to be fun to try and deploy this. Produce content internally. Gamify it if you'd like to. Get people competing, get departments, get teams competing against each other for who's completing it, or who's getting the best phishing results, or who's getting the best reporting results into the IT teams and that. So there's a number of ways that you can make this fun and enjoyable, and that it can be celebrated in an organization. Have monthly awards for teams, departments, individuals who are doing very well on the phishing simulations. When you are launching simulated phishing into an organization, it shouldn't be a dreaded thing when that thing arrives in the mailbox. It should be something each month that you're looking forward to, whether you're going to be able to spot it or not. And everyone can have a giggle about how obvious the latest one was that the team sent out, or who fell for that one. Everyone can have a laugh about it and then move on. It shouldn't be seen as a negative thing. And it's definitely something that we need to be really careful about. A lot of people think cybersecurity and IT is super boring, and that's why they're not in it. That's why they don't do it. That's why they have absolutely zero interest. And now we want to teach them about it. It's not part of their job. They don't like it. They want to stick their head in the sand. So try and make it as fun, enjoyable, and as engaging as possible, and try and gamify it. Try and make it a positive experience. Give out awards. Celebrate people who are doing well. Identify heroes in the organization that can help promote this within their own teams as well. And that really a lot of the time falls to sort of your mid-level managers, your team leaders, your department heads. A lot of those guys and girls can be promoting this internally and really pushing this engagement and fun element around cybersecurity.
I can see the question there from Damien, and I think Dan has sort of talked about those award side. You know, that ultimately where you really want to be is that whether it's a phishing simulation or whether it's a suspicious email, and even if that email turns out to not be anything malicious, but it's that culture of reporting. If you can get people to report, you know, and the people are reporting it, and it does actually, let's just say, for example, it does turn out to be malicious, then you've got another team that are looking at the time to detect that is malicious. Then it's sandboxing that, and then it's the time to recover from that. You've got multiple teams all working, you know, even though they don't realize that they're working in unison, but working in unison. Exactly as Dan says, you know, provided your organization can provide that, you know, you see it for Amazon vouchers, you see it for Starbucks vouchers, or any coffee company, for example. But the point is you're starting to reward that behavior. And I think sometimes as well, if you don't even communicate that you're going to reward that behavior, it just comes out of the blue, word gets around, and that, you know, that is actually in some respects far more impactful, because then you're not just gaming it for the sake of gaming it. You're actually identifying a genuine good behavior quietly behind the scenes. That person or that team gets rewarded based on that, and then you start to. And again, this is what I talk about. It's not just an annual thing. This is where you start to look at your roadmaps, and by the time you get your roadmaps, you know, once you've got to the year whatever within the program, you've then fostered a culture of this just happening behind the scenes all the time.
Perfect. Thanks, Sharif, and thanks for answering Damien's question. The last question is a bit of a double barrel. The first bit is for you, Dan, and then the second bit would be for you, Sharif. So for you, Dan, how can organizations effectively engage and maintain user attention to foster behavioral changes through security awareness training? And then for you, Sharif, how does the success of security awareness training impact an organization's compliance with cyber insurance regulations? Dan, do you want to get started?
Yeah, cool, Wes. Maintaining user attention and engagement. I'd say first things first is keep it simple. As organizations mature, they can get a little bit more advanced in what they're talking about and different behaviors and really get into that. But certainly starting out, you want to keep it as simple as possible and relatable as well. When I say relatable, if all your training is talking about is how you need to be compliant with our security policy, and this is our security policy and you need to follow it or else, no one cares. Everybody switches off. It's like, you know, take your security policy and poke it, mate. We need to make it as personal as possible for individuals. You know, how does it apply to them? What they are learning, what we're trying to teach them, can they apply that at home? How does this apply to their own accounts and their own apps and their own online life? If we can teach them that light bulb moment will go off for them, and they'll go, great, okay, I now need to go and change all my passwords. I need to set up MFA on my banking. I need to make sure that my mobile device is safe. And then they will start implementing much stronger behaviors at home, and they'll bring that into the workplace. And that comes through simplicity. If we bombard them with really technical jargon and really boring content and try and get people to explain stuff that sounds super impressive on how much they know from a technical front, you know, your normal guys and girls are just going to turn off to that. They'll bore them to tears. So first things first, we've got to keep it simple. Also try and keep it as, you know, people getting scammed and losing millions and organizations going out of business is not a happy story. But if we are also just bombarding employees all day long with horror stories and shock stories, it just puts a major downer on it, and a lot of people will then turn off to it and they'll put their head in the sand. They're like, this is not something that is able to be overcome, and you know, I'm not smart enough for this, and they'll just turn off to it. Whereas if you approach it in a nice, simple, manageable, effective way, employees will be empowered by the small things that they can do to really change their security game and really change the security risk that they face, the organization face, and that they face at home. So keeping it simple, nice and easy is really important. And then I'd say next, really from an engagement and an attention point of view, is the frequency that training is being deployed, the frequency that you're talking about, and the type of training that you're using, and the sort of size of training. So years gone, it was classroom-based training, and you would have to take a day off work and go sit in a classroom, and it would be death by PowerPoint for a day, and you'd be poking your eyes out, hoping to God that the day would finish sooner than later. And the vast majority of organizations have moved on from that now, and they've moved into the sort of digital world, and they're using e-learning. But even today, we're still seeing examples of organizations with e-learning that is hours long, and expecting employees to sit through hours and hours of training, and they don't have the time for it, and they don't have the attention capacity for it. I mean, if you look at what your average person is consuming online now, you look at the social media out there, you look at where they're getting their content. It's from short blogs, it's from short YouTube, it's from TikTok, it's from Instagram. This is what they're living on. So adults have grown accustomed to getting a lot of their learning, a lot of their training in very small bite sizes. So we cannot be expecting employees to sit for hours trying to consume information. They're just not going to take it in, especially for something that is they don't perceive as bringing major benefit to them immediately. So if we're going to get this across, if we're going to make those small changes on a regular basis, we need to have frequent training, and that's at least monthly, and it needs to be in bite-sized packages. That it's regular training, it's continuous training in small, consumable either videos or micro modules. And it's really, if we're going to go digital, we need to be looking at micro content as much as possible, so that people consume and actually use that, start changing behaviors before they take on new training again. So I'd say that those are definitely probably the two most important things around engagement and user attention.
So cyber insurance. So one of my previous roles, which I didn't introduce myself in at the start, was I was the head of training and advisory services for a global cyber insurer, one of the top 10. And one of my roles, several roles really, but one of the roles was to, if you will, set compliance standards of what our underwriters would underwrite to from a control standpoint, just to provide a little bit of sort of external, if you will, whilst we sat within the underwriting team, some external validation as to what we're asking and why we're asking it. So the question is how does the success of security awareness training impact the organization's compliance with cyber insurance regulations? So cyber insurers will look at various different controls, and based on their appetite. So that will be the insurer itself, but also the individual underwriter. Now, the larger the organization, underwriters are in a very blessed position to be able to compare mum off dad, if that makes sense. They get to see what a specific organization within a specific sector looks like, and what good looks like versus what doesn't. And they take that with them. They take that mindset with them when they look and assess various organizations. Doesn't matter, dependent on the size of that organization. Now, in cyber insurance, we've had our seatbelt moment, I think. And I'm not in that space anymore, but we had our seatbelt moment, and that was with some various controls, for example. And what I mean by the seatbelt moment was, in motor insurance, the seatbelt was one of the control measures that effectively was seen as saving lots and lots of lives. Well, in cyber insurance, what we're trying to do or what we're trying to do in cybersecurity in many ways is increase the cost of attack. Yes, we're trying to increase our defenses, but ultimately, if we make it harder or more costly for an attacker to go after us, then ultimately, sadly to say, they're going to go after the next person. And in many ways, that's where cyber insurance is looking at is one organization better equipped to prevent, detect, and respond to a cyber attack than the next organization. And it doesn't matter how large or small you are, there is an underwriter looking at every one of your risks largely, especially when it comes to cyber insurance, because it's complex. The other thing to remember when it comes to insurance, whether we like it or not, I mean, let's be honest, we all hate insurance until the day we need it. But one thing to remember when it comes to cyber insurance is in the cybersecurity control space, they are very much a soft power. When they decide to say that we want to go and do something, from whether it's put in MFA or security awareness as a control, those that buy that insurance, have to implement those controls. And what you will see over time, because cyber insurance is still a relatively young industry, is you're probably going to see controls increase then decrease based on the economic factors. You know, if insurers are making money, they want to be more competitive, maybe ask less questions and so on and so forth. However, by asking less questions, you potentially increase your attack profile, because then organizations do less and then they receive more attacks and so on and so forth. And there is still very much in that. Eventually that will standardize, and there will be standardized questions. So, for example, if you do not have MFA, I still believe that across all the insurers at the minute, if you do not have MFA, running for privileged access or remote access, for example, you are non-compliant with insurance. Many insurers have cyber insurance, have cybersecurity awareness training as part of that as well. Some don't, some do. Some offer it as part of a service. So if you're buying a cyber insurance policy, for example, speak with them. They can offer that as part of the service there. But the point is, if your insurer requires that you have it and you don't do it, you are non-compliant. It's that simple. If you are doing it really, really well, they will know, because you'll get some underwriters asking you, well, tell me, I don't care how many simulated phishing simulations that you clicked on. I don't care that you had an 18% click through. What I want to know is how many of those were reported on. So they will understand the maturity of an organization's, but they don't expect a micro organization to be at that level of maturity, but they do expect a larger organization to be at that level of maturity. So does it impact your cyber insurance? 100%. Yes, it does. It will be a contributing factor. Does it mean that if you've got a hugely mature cybersecurity awareness program in place, that your premiums are going to plummet through the floor? No, it's one of very many various other controls that an insurer will do to get a whole view of an organization. I hope that answers that question.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Sharif. We're about out of time. I don't see any more questions. We answered Damien's questions. I don't have any more questions. So Dan, Sharif, thank you so much for your insights. I really do appreciate it. To the audience, thank you for joining. As I mentioned, we will put this on our YouTube channel. So yes, that's the end of our webinar. Have a lovely day further, and we'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks very much, everyone. Cheers, Sharif.
Cheers. Thanks, guys.